All right. So look, we got Julio Jones on the trade market. That was at the top of our head early a couple days ago. Um, and we all had some thoughts. And we'll to get this started, right? We'll go ahead and hit the quote of the week. The quote of the week actually comes from Ethan Cadeau of NBC Sports Washington. And it was part of an article that he wrote pertaining to Julio Jones. And he stated, while adding Jones would make all other 31 NFL clubs immediately better, does it make sense for Washington football team to make a run after the two-time All-Pro? For starters, Washington had already significantly upgraded its receiver room this offseason, investing in the position in both free agency and the draft. That's his thoughts. AJ, I love when you start these things off, man, because you bring the fire, man. Let me hear what you have to say. First off, do you agree with him? But obviously that'll lead into the question: Are you trading for Julio Jones? Because the word is not even going for a first round pick. So
yeah, I mean, I'm definitely trading for Julio Jones. I don't know who the hell Ethan is, but he can go sit his ass somewhere else. Like, bruh, we talking about one of the greatest wide receivers of all time, who's still got plenty of game left in him. Absolute dog. As you guys know, since I've been on the show, I always talk about having dogs on your team. And I mean, those are one of those type of guys that can take over a game, provides a huge threat to the defense. You got a game plan around making sure you stop him, which opens up the rest of the the offense, running game. Terry, Logan, your slot receiver can eat all of that. You can line him up anywhere on the field, and he's going to put in work. So it's like, especially now with us knowing the dynamics of, the background of him wanting out as well, and them needing to kind of get rid of him by after June 1st due to salary cap reasons, you can get an all-pro wide receiver, a number one of number ones for a second to third round pick. Hell yeah. Like, I don't know what's wrong with some of the journalists in the area, fans. Like, you gotta stop being scared of getting impact players or guys with names. Like, just because you've had like a past of maybe things not working out with Albert Haysbert, who isn't even like an elite talent. We're talking about a future Hall of Famer here. Like, even Dion came here, but he still played well to some degree. Maybe not what we've seen in previous years, but it's like you got to get over that fear. I mean, scared money don't make money. So at the end of the day, I feel like if you have the salary cap and you also have a need for a wide receiver, a legit number one, you should. If you're a team out there, you should definitely be interested, especially if you can get an All-Pro like that at second or third round.
Trey, where you at with this?
Now, see, here's where I come in. Like I said on Twitter, I would love to add Julio Jones on the team, but I just want to save that ammo for a quarterback right now because, like I said, I don't want to take us out of the running before we even get started. All right, let's say, here you go, AJ. So next year, let's say Russell Wilson's still malcontent with his situation and the asking price is a first and a second rounder to start for this year. But then you don't even have that second no more because you traded for Julio the year before. So, and then look at the teams that's kind of in the market for Julio right now. The teams that's kind of being mentioned. I think I see the Patriots being named. They just drafted their quarterback. Titans, they're really content with Tannehill. He'll be there for a few years. And I think maybe the Chiefs might be even mentioning that they got Mahomes. So they can afford to trade like a second round pick because they already got their guys. But Washington doesn't have a long-term answer at quarterback, and we don't know what the cost will be because for the way I see it, I don't see Washington picking in the top 5 anytime soon, and I don't know how else you acquire your long-term answer without having to give up some of those assets, and that's why I would save some. If it's for a third and a fourth, cool, I'll take Julio because you can still get your quarterback. But second, I'm a little hesitant.
I mean, the second ain't really that valuable if you put it in perspective. If your thoughts are you want to pursue a quarterback, it's going to take first round picks. A second is not going to put
Right.
it over the edge. I mean, and you can also utilize the players that you have that you can move, whether it be a Allen, Ionitis, a Payne, or whoever. You could possibly move a player to make up for that second that you would lose. But I mean, if you put it in perspective, we don't know the future. We don't know who's going to be available in the market next year. As far as like free agent quarterbacks, we have an idea, right? But as far as like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers probably available, and might make that move before the start of this season. We just don't know. But in order, I feel like you have to get dogs on your team. And if you are going to rock with Ryan Fitzpatrick for the year, why not go add a playmaker on the outside? I mean, yeah, you signed Curtis Samuel, but when you really break it down, Curtis Samuel contract is going to be worth much more than what Julio Jones contract is currently. I mean, he has a big contract that you got to take on, but if you really break it down the following year, Curtis Samuel is going to be making more than him. He's never put up anywhere remotely close to the numbers Julio has, nor is he necessarily that big of a threat. I feel like this team needs a number one wide receiver since. I mean, have they really had a number one wide receiver in my lifetime?
Does DJ count?
I think so. I think DJ counts.
I think he could count. He could count, but even with that, they didn't feature him like he was the number one.
Yeah.
So if you put in perspective, this team has been searching for a legit like top wide receiver that's been consistent for years. Of course, you had a sprinkle of, I guess we could say, D-Jack, Santana Moss, but aside from that, you got to go back to the early 90s, late 80s to talk about Art Monk.
Yeah.
And like I said, this team needs more dogs. You need something else on that offense that helps Terry get to the next level as well, but also opens up your offense. And adding a Julio Jones, it's a game changer. I don't necessarily think like the Patriots are interested. I think people just connecting them with any possible player movement. But guys aren't really eager to go to the Patriots right now, especially with Tom Brady not there. I mean, that's not the key to getting a ring anymore. So at the end of the day,
no, AJ, I wanted to ask you this. So what do you think the team's ceiling is right now as it stands with the roster, and what do you think the team's ceiling would be with Julio Jones this year if him adding to this roster?
I mean, I feel like right now the way the team is constructed, they can definitely compete for the NFC East title. Outside of that, I really don't see them doing much in the playoffs because the playoffs is a whole different ballgame. And that's when you need those type of elite playmakers, those dogs that can go and make things happen and can also shift the focus of the game plan. That's why, to me, it's always important to add those type of top-tier pieces. Now, if you bring in Julio Jones in with a gunslinger like Fitzpatrick, oh, my God, like, it changes everything. He's definitely going to put the ball up there for Julio to go get. You also can run underneath plays with Samuel, Terry. It changes everything for the offense because now you can't really sit in the box. Some people don't view Terry McLaurin as a threat. Of course, we know he's fast. We know Curtis Samuel's speed or whatever, but those aren't guys that defense is scared of. If you go ahead and add Julio on the outside, now you also have opened up the run game for Antonio Gibson, McKissick, and whoever else is going to be another back out there. You also open underneath routes for Logan Thomas. It changes everything offensively for the team.
So to add to this,
no matter who's playing.
That is true. And I was going to say, for those of you who hate Fitzpatrick, or don't trust him, one thing's for sure: if you got Julio on this team, that'll change your perspective on Fitzpatrick because Julio will make Fitzpatrick look good. But with that being said, to add to some context from the chat, King of the North, what's going on, Romero? He said making this type of splash move. Actually, I want to save that comment for last. But he also mentioned that people need to. This is to Dre's point. People need to remember that at least Watson and Rodgers are going to be on the block next year. Maybe Wilson, save your money and picks. And he's not trading any big assets for a guy that wasn't even the best receiver on his team. Really shine brighter than Julio. He said that about. I guess he's presuming the 2020.
Hold on.
I gotta finish. He had one more. And then he was like,
Man,
he said making this.
Walk away,
He said making this type of splash move will contradict everything Ron has done. In my opinion, it makes no sense. So, fellas, with that being said, I wanted to save that last comment. The comment that he made, it was actually his first one, but I wanted to save that for last because it's interesting that people and Romero, this is. Yeah, exactly. Say what you say, bro. I respect it. He said I said what I said, and I respect that. Like one of the things that people say, exactly.
Don't mean it makes sense.
So one of the things when people talk about Ron and making moves, right? I understand that quarterback position is obviously the most important position. So like this is going to be an outlier, and I'm acknowledging that before I even state this, right? He did go hard for Matt Stafford. Like he went out there for one of the people that he thought that can compete. You have Ryan Fitzpatrick now, and obviously for whatever it's worth, like you signed him, you didn't have to give up anything in terms of picks, assets and stuff like that. You just signed him in free agency. But when you look at wide receiver and you look at one of the top 5, arguably top 5, definitely top 10 receivers in the NFL, like when you look at this guy who is still capable of producing and having 100 yard, averaging nearly 100 yards a game a season, like he's still capable of doing that. When you do things like that, giving up a second or giving up a third, I don't think that's a significant issue. And the reason why I would consider it, I would lean towards, and I personally would actually pull the trigger, is because, Dre, to your point about the quarterback, we have people that we can give up to compensate for a second round pick. If we had to give up a second round pick, you're looking at, we have a very crowded defensive line. We have people in other places, not saying it's heavy. The heaviest spot is the defensive line, but you have people in other places that you can leverage if this season takes off for Washington. So you have Matt Ioannidis, you have Duron. I'm not saying trade them. I'm not saying these are guys that you give up like for that quarterback. I mean, if we're talking about Russell and Aaron Rodgers, we can revisit this. But you have these type of players on the defensive line where it's like that second round pick means nothing if you get Julio. And Fitzpatrick, compared to for Romero's examples, you're talking about Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers. I would do that shit in a heartbeat. Like I'm not losing anything by giving up a defensive lineman if we're talking about a stud franchise quarterback. But at the same time, I'm just saying trading Julio for a second or third, for me, it kind of goes deeper than worrying about a second or a third round pick. Whereas I can get my top guy and get like 2 or 3 years from Julio and then worry about the rest later. Now, the question for you all, would it be worth it in the sense of him being available? Like, would it be valuable if you get 10 games out of Julio versus 16? Like, is that worth it?
I personally think it's worth it. I mean, Julio's the type of guy, he's probably not going to practice every week. Ain't no problem with that because I know he's going to come prepared the ball. I just think, with everyone thinking for the future with quarterbacks that might be available, what's going to be the more attractive place for a quarterback to force their hand where they want to go? It's going to be where there's weapons. If you add Julio to the mix of what you already have going on offensively, it becomes a more attractive place for Aaron Rodgers, and Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson. Right now, you got some cool little toys to play with, but you ain't got no damn dog like on the outside. If you get a Julio Jones, now you can actually pursue a team, and that player also has to be on board. We're talking about quarterbacks here, so it's not like it's some random player that doesn't get to pick where they necessarily want to go. We're talking about quarterbacks that are going to control their destination, as you've seen with Matthew Stafford. He pushed that he wanted to go to LA, and what happened? They made the option available, and he went there. I mean, you just look at the impact of Josh Allen in Buffalo. They traded for a dog in Stephon Diggs, and it changed the trajectory of the whole team. They were competing to go to a Super Bowl just a couple months ago because they added a dog at receiver, which opened up the game for everybody. Cole Beasley had his best season. He's a third wide receiver on most teams. You know, he had a good season. John Brown. It opened up a lot for that offense because they had a dog. And that's where, you know, I'm with it with when it comes to Julio Jones. I feel like if you add talent like that, it also becomes a more attractive place for these quarterbacks that you're supposedly thinking that you're going to be able to pursue. First round picks are what's going to do it for a quarterback next year. This Washington football team is not going to have a top 10 pick in the draft. So at the end of the day, they have to give up like multiple ones in order to make a move for a quarterback. But it also helps when that quarterback knows that, hey, I can force my hand even more. I know that Julio Jones, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson are there, and they got a young offensive line. I have a better chance of being around like great weapons. And if I'm not mistaken, let me see if I can pull up the quote. But I think even Ron Rivera said today, like, we don't have to rely on the quarterback because the weapons around the he said, we don't have to rely on the quarterback because of the weapons around the quarterback position. So he may even be content with the fact that, hey, we can go into the season with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and they think that their weapons are suitable enough to make it work. But if you can go and add a Julio Jones into the mix for a second and third round pick, why not? I mean, just look at Washington's draft status over the last several years, second and third round picks. What have they really amounted up to?
Nothing, especially the second rounders.
For me, like I said, for me, it comes down to what's your confidence level in Fitzpatrick, you know, regardless of everything else. Because if you listen to a lot of people when they talk Washington football, they always say, oh, well, that team doesn't have a quarterback. They'll just still blatantly disrespect the Ryan Fitzpatrick or whoever else we have on the roster. That team doesn't have a quarterback, so they limit our ceiling. But like I said, the reason why I asked AJ about what would he think our ceiling would be with Julio Jones. Now, if you think Julio Jones takes you to the next level this year with Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm all for it. Like, I mean, you think there's no ceiling for if you acquire Julio Jones with the current roster, then I'm all cool for it. And plus, like I said, AJ's right about Julio Jones. I mean, he's a great player. He's what we don't have. He's that outside wide receiver that we've been needing for years. But as I say, how much does he raise your ceiling as it stands right now? That's where I look at it. And then to Jamal's point about, you know, the leveraging of the defensive linemen, I'm not sure if we're kind of overrating our talent on the line. Now, don't get me wrong, we have talent on the line, especially just the whole group in whole. But how do other teams view an interior defensive lineman, like especially like a Matt Ioannidis? What's the value for Matt Ioannidis, or even if you want to say Daron Payne, maybe second? Well, I don't know.
Let's talk about it. How many are going to start? Like you got the floor, Dre, but how many on the defensive line can start on other teams? You got the floor with that one.
I think all of them can start on other teams, but how many other teams are coveting like interior DL? Now, I think if you're starting to talk about trading some of those DL guys to another team, the first questions they're going to ask is Montez Sweat probably, and they're probably going to know Chase Young's untouchable, but they're going to say, what about Montez Sweat? He's an attractive edge piece. Like, I think edge pieces are more attractive than interior pieces on defensive line. So that's probably where you're starting at when you get to the high-end quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, but a guy like Seattle. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's changed over the years. More teams want interior defensive linemen because of the quarterback getting the ball out so quick. You want the Aaron Rodgers. I mean, not the Aaron Rodgers. You want the Aaron Donalds. You want the Chris Jones. You want the Daron Payne, Matthew Ioannidis, because they're literally pushing those guards and centers right back into the quarterback. So it's kind of changed as far as the importance of the defensive end in comparison to a pass rushing D tackle.
And I was going to mention, you got to think about, now again, I'm only staying within the context of Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, and Russell Wilson, right? I'm not going to stretch any further than that because this is all hypothetical anyway. But at the same time, when you look at certain teams, Seattle needs all types of defensive line. Like, we have the talent. And Seattle can take an interior defensive line and be okay. That'll substitute for a second rounder. That'll substitute for a third rounder. Packers, I don't like Mike Daniels. I fuck with him. He cool. And then I don't know what the situation is in Houston in terms of like their philosophy or their scheme this year. We kind of fit better in the 4-3, so I don't know what their situation is, but it all depends and it's situational based on the team that you're choosing, or the team that you're seeking out that can use these type of players. Obviously, draft picks help, but when you're talking about a 24, 25-year-old defensive lineman in their prime that's playing really good, look, hey, that's where I'm at with it, fellas. It can work. It can work. But switching, we're still on Julio here, but switching to a different angle, I'm going to list off the 10 highest paid receivers in the NFL, right? And after I list these 10, I want to tell you, I mean, there is one on here who's won a Super Bowl, but I want to see like where those teams were in terms of their success, and we go from there, right? So number 10, and this is as of March 20th of this year. So number 10, you got Mike Evans, right? Obviously Tampa Bay won the Super Bowl. Allen Robinson, Chicago Bears. Bro, they didn't make the, yeah, they did. They lost against the Saints. So they lost in the against the Saints. Kenny Galladay just got signed to the Giants, but he was with Detroit last year. Detroit, terrible. Kansas City, Tyreek Hill. I mean, Pat Mahomes, like self-explanatory. Odell Beckham, Cleveland Browns. That's number 6. He's tied with 6 with Tyreek Hill. Number 5, Mike Thomas. He's with New Orleans Saints. We already know how that happened with him and Drew Brees. Number 4, Amari Cooper, Dallas Cowboys. Not even making the playoffs. Number 3, Keenan Allen, Los Angeles Chargers. Didn't make the playoffs. Number 2, Julio Jones, $22 million AAV. And then number 1, DeAndre Hopkins, 27 AAV, 27.25 AAV, Arizona Cardinals. And we know how they turned out. And I can't stand their coach. So personally, I'm biased anyway, but he shouldn't even be in the NFL. But fellas, those are the top 10 guys, right? And I guess my question to you all is we already know where we stand with Julio, all 3 of us. But is that top receiver even necessary? Because you're going to be paying this much. Like, even if you trade for Julio, he's already still going to be in the top 5 in terms of AAV. Like, is this the guy? Do you need this person, especially who's going to be taking that much money up for your team?
I believe you do, and I believe that Ron Rivera also knows that. If you guys don't remember, they tried to sign Amari Cooper for $22 million a year last year. The only reason they didn't get Amari Cooper is because Dallas sold them on marketing and branding opportunities, and also the fact that there's no state income tax. But Amari Cooper was probably going to be a Washington Redskins last year. They know the importance of a wide receiver, one that can be an elite number 1. And some people don't even think Amari's a number 1. You know, a lot of people think that he disappears in games. So imagine that. They were willing to offer a guy $22 million a year that disappeared in games. Julio don't disappear in no games. You feel me? So they obviously know that they need a wide receiver and they need someone of elite caliber. But I feel like it just really depends on the philosophy of your team. I mean, with the guys that you name off, you know, if you take Michael Thomas away from that New Orleans Saints offense, it looks completely different. You take Kenny Galladay from the Lions offense, and it really doesn't result in any difference in their wins or losses, you know? You take DeAndre Hopkins, he definitely has an impact on the game. So it really just all depends on the overall structure of the team. And in this situation, Washington has the perfect infrastructure for an elite talent at wide receiver that will cost a premium cost to come in and definitely provide an impact, not only on their individual stats, but to everybody else around them as a collective.
Where you at with it, Dre?
Okay. For me, so I had to, while we were talking, I had to go look this up. Now, I'm not doing it now, definitely no, because I'm looking at the free agent class for next year. And I'm looking at Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, and Devontae Adams. And I don't think there's a chance in hell Devontae Adams goes back to Green Bay if Aaron Rodgers isn't there. So, I mean, you got three guys you could potentially go after that you don't have to give any assets up for. You could just go sign them with the money you were going to give Amari Cooper a couple years ago or something. So, yeah, I'll take my chances more so on free agency with the wide receiver stuff, especially if you want that high-end guy in wide receiver, because you don't have to trade for him, and you can go out and give him his deal, whatever. And plus, I don't think Julio is the difference between us, having a Super Bowl this year. I don't think he comes in and makes us a Super Bowl contender right away. So I would take my chances with the free agent class next year.
Hey, that offense was bottom seven last year, man.
Yeah.
I'm just
saying, man. Bottom 32 quarterbacks. We did have bottom 32 quarterbacks.
I mean, I think, a lot of that is overlooked. Like, a lot of people, Washington made the playoffs, but they also weren't a great team, So a lot of people overlook the fact that the offense really wasn't doing shit. People were screaming, damn, who's playing wide receiver? Yeah, you had a whole bunch of niggas off the street playing wide receiver, pretty much. Like, I mean, even if you look at the roster, they really don't have a veteran presence at wide receiver. I'm not gonna say that people is out here looking up to Adam Humphries,
Hey, who you want to be like when you grow up, son? Adam Humphries.
Adam Humphries.
Oh my goodness.
All right. All those names you got, all those names that you mentioned can all be franchise tagged, and they probably will never be available. The only one that probably will is Allen Robinson, and he couldn't clean Julio Jones' shoes, in my opinion.
But he's a dog, don't you think? Don't you think Allen Robinson's a dog?
I will go, yes.
I don't believe.
Come on, AJ.
Hey, I'm about to say, AJ.
He may not be Julio,
AJ.
But he's a number one receiver.
Nah, he's not number one in mine. I don't know. That's my opinion.
Oh, man.
Even this offseason, guys like, I hope they pursue Kenny Galladay, Allen Robinson, or whatever. I'm like, y'all overlooking Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin, nice as shit. Like,
yeah, I fuck with him.
But I'm not about to sit here and call any of those guys dogs. I mean, Devontae nice as hell, but he's definitely gonna get tagged if anything. They're not about to just let him go for free.
Yeah, that shit ain't sweet. Not for Devontae, especially in a situation where Green Bay is possibly losing their quarterback. So they ain't about to let him go. All right, so to the chat, Zacy, what's going on, Zacy? If you're still in here, he said obviously Terry is not as good as Julio, but he's been a legit one with mid at receivers around him. And then Disco mentioned, obviously, this is a turn talking about the discussion when we talked about the top 10 guys. He was mentioning that you still got to pay Terry. And obviously, Washington would be fools to not even entertain it after year 3. So yes, I agree. You still got to pay Terry, but I don't think paying Terry is going to hinder them from getting any top tier receivers if they wanted to. They can still get that and still be okay at the receiver position. Any last thoughts or comments on this Julio Jones thing? So obviously AJ, I say trade. AJ and I say trade. Dre say do not trade. Is there anything else we want to mention?
For me, I think it would be very telling if Washington doesn't go after Julio, because I just feel like you need dogs. Like, you got to get dogs on the team, especially if you're going to rock with a gunslinger and Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. The more guys out there that you have that can go get the ball and make plays, the more opportunities this offense has to be better than, the bottom half of the league. But right now, you kind of got the same guys. Curtis Samuel, he's cool, but he's more so a gadget guy. You really don't have anybody outside of Terry at the moment. It's kind of like the same guys are right back again from last year.
But outside of the wide receivers, I think a lot of people are forgetting that Antonio Gibson came on kind of strong later on in the season before he got hurt, and he was just learning the position at running back last year. And I don't even think he scratched the surface of what you can see as a receiving target, because they used J.D. McKissick a lot when it was time for receiving. That and he was incredible. Like J.D. McKissick was that dude when he would come in and receive. He was so reliable. But I don't think you saw a lot of the offense's potential being tapped in until you started to see what a healthy, competent QB can do. And when Alex Smith was halfway healthy before his leg gave out, the offense moved the ball. They did a lot better than they did before. And even Heineke, when he finally played, I mean, the game and a half he played, you saw the potential of what this offense could be when it's running kind of competently. And even then, you still didn't have a healthy Antonio Gibson, who I'm really high on.
Hey, but Dre, just like Barney used to say back in the day, just imagine. Imagine Julio Jones with everything you just said. It opens up the passing game for the running backs even more.
It will. But we gotta rob Peter. What's the saying? We gotta rob Peter to pay Paul.
Just imagine.
I don't want to do that.